Hello basketball coaches and basketball players, my name is Alan from Al's Basketball Training, and today I'm going to talk to you about something that's a very basic thing to teach your players, and that is a 2-3 zone defense. Now personally, as a basketball coach, I always prefer to teach my players a man-to-man defense first. Then I go into a 2-3 defense either a few months, maybe a year later, and then I go into my specialty defenses, what you can purchase down below, the 1-4 and the 4-1 zone defense. Absolutely amazing defenses altogether. However, today we're going to go over the 2-3. Now, the 2-3 is when you have two players up top, three players in the bottom. Let's get down to the clipboard. How I like to teach my players this defense is to show them a video like this one where I teach them on a clipboard how to essentially run the 2-3 zone defense. Then I would go and teach them on the court with a couple of players, 5 players obviously, in their zones. And then I would have a couple of players move around those certain areas with the ball and say, hey, if the ball is here, you're going to be double team here. This is a trapping area, and so on and so forth. So let's get down to the clipboard and let me explain to you what a 2-3 zone defense is. Okay, so a 2-3 zone defense is when you have 2 players up top, like I was saying, and 3 players on the bottom. Going from there, each player has an area of the court that they're defending. They are not defending a single individual player. They are defending an area. So, player 2 would be guarding an area like this. Player 1 would be guarding an area like this. Player 4 would then be guarding an area down below. Player 5 would be guarding that area. And player 3 would be guarding this area. Anywhere where there is an overlap, here, those 5 areas here are all double team locations. So for example, if player 1 is in the middle, you would see player 1 and 2 move and double team player 1. Meanwhile, if player 1 was over here, you would see player 4 and 2 then go and double team that location. Moving on from there, if the ball is down below, generally speaking, you would want to have a double team, one on each side. However, there are things that happen in a zone that would then negate the ability to be able to go and double team in the low post. Let me explain to you. So we're going to have 5 players on the court, and this is when I would have my players on the court. This is how I would walk them through how a zone defense works. So I would have basically a simple 5-out offense running up against a 2-3 zone. And I would have my players pass the ball around just like I am on this clipboard today. So when the ball is up top, because these players are now open, we would have player 4 and 3 move up and player 5 move up just a bit. When the ball gets passed over, we're going to have player 2 go and double team player 2. If there was no player down here, I would then explain to my players I want a double team up here. But with there being a player down here, I don't want any open shots, so then I would move player 4 down in the passing lane. Player 5 would move over, player 3 would move over, and player 1 would be defending player 1 on the edge of his zone. This is why I always like to teach man-to-man defense first, because then they understand what passing lanes are, what man-on defense is, things like that. That's why you should always teach man-to-man defense first. It makes teaching a zone defense much easier. Then I would have player 2 pass down to player 5. We would be in single coverage. Player 2 would then be passing lane. Player 1 would then be at the free throw line. Player 5 would be defending the edge of his zone, and same as player 3. Once we understand what the zones are like when they're the movements of the zones, then we would be passing the ball around, and they would be then defending those same areas as if we were when the ball was on this side. At this point, once they understand the basic movements of the zone, which I hope that my explanation here makes you understand the basic motions of the zone, we would then have players who would cut down into the low post so that we could demonstrate what it's like to have a player in the low post. In which case we would have player 3 here who would then be not right on double teaming player 1 because we have a player out on the perimeter. He would be down here, not necessarily reaching in to get a foul, but reaching in if player 1 was to go and dribble the ball. Player 5 would be on his man there, and this would allow you to go and really disrupt what player 1 is doing in the low post. Obviously, player 1 is generally a point guard, but this would be the same no matter what, whether we had a center down there or not. Then I would have an extra player at the high post so that I could demonstrate what to do if a team is trying to overload our defense. So if a team is trying to overload our defense, what I would prefer to happen is player 5 to stay defending player 5, player 4 to come and defend the middle of the key, and then I would want player 1 to do what player 3 was doing earlier, which is to stay in between players 2 and 4, but still disrupting, staying close enough to player 2 so that player 2 cannot get off a clean shot. We do not want player 5 to move up, even though technically some coaches will say the whole key is player 5's domain. We don't want player 5 to move up because now this leaves player 5 blue open for a layup. So again, a 2-3 zone defense, you're guarding an area of the court. These are their areas. And on top of that, I'm going to explain to you how I like my team to run the 2-3 zone. How I like to have my team run the 2-3 zone is I do not want any player to go outside of the 3-point line. And there is a reason for that. By extending past the 3-point line, you are now creating an opportunity for a team to spread you out and leave your zone wide open. So one way that you can beat a zone is by spreading out the zone so that there's many areas to attack in, but also another way that you can attack a zone is by collapsing a zone as well. So personally, I'm okay with an outside player collapsing on a player who is driving. However, I am not okay with an inside player trying to collapse on a player who is out on the perimeter, or let me explain to you what I mean. So, for example, we have our 5 out again. We have a double team up top. We have players who are moving up just to disrupt the zone or to disrupt the offense. And then what I see a lot of times is for when a player passes over and he cuts down towards the low post, or we may have player 5 go down towards the low post and now they're creating almost like an overload situation, which to some coaches this is their version of an overload, even though it's more like a triangle offense. And what we'll see is a player driving. So let's say player 3 drives. I don't want to see player 5 come up and defend that driving collapse player 5 up, which now leaves player 5 blue wide open. What I would much rather see is for player 4 to not pop up and defend, but to stay down low and to create a wall with player 5. The reason why we want to do this is by having player 4 higher, that's going to leave a back door open for player 1. By having player 4 stay low with player 5, if player 3 was to drive, we're closer, if there was a bounce pass done to player 1, we're closer to turn around to stay straight up and contest that layup, but also we're disallowing player 3 to get a shot up over top of 2 of our taller players. So by allowing your bigger players to stay home closer to the rim and not pushing themselves up closer to a player who is driving, which not necessarily collapsing a defense, but drawing a defensive player towards him to create open driving lanes or cutting lanes, is not beneficial to how your team should be running a zone defense. And I would explain to my players and I would show them the mistakes that they can do on the court. So a lot of coaches will teach a man-to-man or a zone defense the proper way of running it, but they never explain to their players what a mistake looks like. So that when I'm in the game and I'm saying to my players, hey, you're moving up too high when they're driving, if I was to say that and they just possibly just learn that zone defense, or if I just said that and even if they're 2 or 3 years into knowing a 2-3 zone defense, they might not understand what you mean by, hey, I'm moving too high. So by showing them, hey, this is you moving too high, this is what can happen, a backdoor cut, a baseline drive, baseline cut, whatever it may be, those mistakes, they now understand, oh, by me moving too high, it's leaving the baseline open. Now they're understanding, hey, if I screwed up in game, and my coach is saying, hey, I moved too high, maybe I moved too high, I wasn't really paying attention, and I'll move back down, and I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to create that wall with player 4 and 5, or 3 and 5, or whatever it may be. I hope that this video helps you as a basketball coach. I hope it helps your team, but I hope it also helps you as a player if you're a player watching this video. I'll see you guys again later on today for the second video of the day.